You can pass a law. You can allocate a budget. You can build infrastructure. And still, nothing changes. Why? Because governance is not just about systems. It's about people. And people are driven by attitude. An attitude is a simple idea. It's how you evaluate something, positively or negatively. But inside that simple idea, there's a powerful structure. Every attitude has three components: what people feel, what they believe, what they do. Let's take a real example. Open defecation. A person may feel comfortable going to the open field. They may believe it is natural or even healthier. So they continue the behavior. Now imagine you build a toilet. Will behavior change automatically? No, because the attitude has not changed. This is the first lesson for administration. You cannot change behavior without changing belief and emotion. Now let's go deeper. Attitudes also have structure. First, direction. People either like or dislike something. Second, strength. Some attitudes are weak. They change easily. Others are strong. They resist change. Third, accessibility. How quickly does that attitude come to mind? Because the faster it comes, the more it influences behavior. And then, ambivalence. People can feel both positive and negative at the same time. They may like social media, but hate the time it wastes. This internal conflict explains why behavior is often inconsistent. Now ask an important question. Why do attitudes exist? Because they serve functions. Sometimes, they help people gain rewards and avoid punishment. Sometimes, they simplify the world. People don't analyze everything. They rely on shortcuts. Sometimes, they protect the ego. A person fails, but instead of accepting it, they blame the system. And sometimes, attitudes express identity, values, beliefs, self-image. Now comes a critical insight. Attitude does not always lead to behavior. A person may support cleanliness and still litter. Why? Because behavior depends on multiple factors: social pressure, convenience, opportunity, habits. So how do we predict behavior? By being specific. If you ask, do you support environmental protection? Most people will say yes. But if you ask, will you segregate waste tomorrow morning? Now you get a real answer. Specific attitudes predict specific behavior. Now let's understand how attitudes shape thinking. People don't see reality directly. They filter it. They look for information that supports their beliefs. They ignore information that challenges them. And when someone disagrees, they defend their position. This is why misinformation spreads easily. Because people accept what matches their attitude. Now let's move to moral attitudes. These are not just opinions. They feel absolute. Right or wrong, good or bad. And they are emotional. That's why moral issues create strong reactions. For a civil servant, this creates a challenge. Because personal morality must align with constitutional morality. Your decisions must be guided by law, not personal bias. Now consider political attitudes. Every individual has political beliefs. But a civil servant must remain neutral. Your role is not to promote ideology. It is to implement policy. This is the foundation of administrative ethics. Now we come to the most practical part. Social influence and persuasion. How do you change attitudes? First, social influence. People change behavior because of others. Sometimes they comply. They follow rules to avoid punishment. Sometimes they identify. They follow someone they admire. And sometimes they internalize. They truly believe in the idea. As an administrator, your goal is to move people from compliance to internalization. Because only internalized change is sustainable. Now let's talk about persuasion. There are two ways people process information. First, deep thinking. People analyze, evaluate, and question. This creates strong attitudes. Second, shortcuts. People rely on cues. Who is speaking? How confident they are? How often the message is repeated? Both are useful. For experts, use data and logic. For the public, use trust and relatability. Now a key insight. Fear works, but only with a solution. If you say, smoking causes cancer, you create fear. But if you add, here's how to quit, you create action. Without a solution, people ignore the message. Now consider resistance. People don't always accept persuasion. If you push too hard, they resist. If you threaten freedom, they react. And if attitudes are strong, they are very difficult to change. So what should an administrator do? Prepare people. Expose them to weak counterarguments. Build awareness. This creates resistance to misinformation. Now let's bring everything together. Attitude is not just a theory. It is a tool. It explains why policies fail, why behavior resists change, why communication matters. If you understand attitude, you don't just implement schemes. You design interventions. You influence behavior. You create lasting change. And that is the difference between a manager and a true public leader. Subscribe for more ethics and psychology content. And in the comments, which policy do you think failed? Because it ignored human attitude? Because once you understand people, you understand governance.